I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon. Belly up to the bar, we've kept your seat, and it's great to see you back tonight. Biff is going to be a bartender. He pours with the best of them, and the smoking lamp is lighted. We don't water our drinks, just like we don't water our conversation, politics, religion, crime, culture, economics, race, sex, science, law. We talk about it all here at the Saloon. Nothing is sacred. All that we ask is that you flush the toilet, jiggle the handle, and don't forget to tip your waitress. Tonight, on the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, the 9th District Court of Appeals decides to overturn President Trump's travel stay. The 9th District Court of Appeals keeps its perfect leftist bent. It's nothing but consistent. Senator Jeff Sessions is confirmed as U.S. Attorney General. And White Mamba, a renowned, shining, and highly respected attorney from the right coast, weighs in at the Aftermath. Yes, you're listening to the Aftermath, which is all the shite that couldn't be fit into the Tuesday show following Sackheads. And have we got a show for you? OMG, so to say. It's almost like, where do you begin? Well, number one, it's raining like hell outside. I had to go through the water puddles like crazy to drive here. It's really deep, it's really windy, it's really raining. Thank goodness I had to, I kept my window up. The rain was literally pouring in, positively horizontal. As I was coming up here. And then, of course, I've got 3 bags to carry, 1 laptop, another bag full of microphones and earphones and all that kind of stuff that I had to connect up to the board here. And, of course, when I got in here, I looked around, I thought for sure that Ollie, the calico cat, would be inside here. And no, I'm sorry, Ollie is not here. It's so sad. So sad for Ollie. Yes, what we're going to do now, about a week ago, if you recall, I interviewed Dave Milner, the unpleasant blind guy who isn't. And unfortunately, the laptop at that time decided that it was going to just go clunk. And so there's nothing like showbizzing yourself. So everything was rolling wonderfully, and then all of a sudden the laptop died. It took me about 10 or 15 minutes to get it back up again, because that's half the fun of raising it. And then we tried to continue that, nothing went wrong. And then I had to figure out how to splice the whole thing together. Thank God Sackhead Sean helped me out with that. But I thought that the Ninth Circuit was going to come back 2 days ago with a judgment, with an opinion. And then last night when I was on Sackhead's radio, minus Sean plus Clint, we were both of us wondering, okay, well, what does that mean? They said they would probably have an opinion on Tuesday night, so everyone waited Tuesday night. And then all day Wednesday, nothing. And then today, something. But hang on. Before we get there, I can't forget my manners, because I try to be a gentleman at all places at all times. I'd like to say welcome everyone to chat. Literally, welcome everyone to chat because there's your name. I'd like to welcome White Mamba and Dave Milner and one viewer who is unidentified, probably because they're from Russia. Yes, the Russians monitor me. You'd be well advised to do that. Never reveal your names in chat because right now you're probably getting hacked. Hacked, I tell you! Like that, the Mars sound. Ack-mack, hack. Where was I going with that? In any event, at the bottom of the hour, 8:30 my time, 11:30 your time, with what? Cross phalanges, tarsals, and metatarsals. Mamba, White, one each, will call in at the bottom of the hour, and I'm going to grill him. I'm going to grill the Mamba like he's never been grilled. It's like pulling out a convection oven. It'll be that bad. It'll be horrible. There will be roasting. There will be toasting. There will be spittle forming on the sides of people's mouths. Mostly Mambas. No, it won't be that bad. Anyway, at the bottom of the hour, with luck, Skype is up. And Mamba will call in, and we'll talk about some of the legal aspects of this. I thought today I was going to talk about Jeff Sessions, because I thought, all right, it didn't come in yesterday, so Thursday, fine. Boy, did it come in. And as expected, the leftists are just peeing themselves in excitement. You walk around with, and you can't help but notice their soaked crotches, as they're just absolutely overjoyed with the particular ruling. So if you haven't heard, and I'm sure you have, the Ninth Circuit District Court of Appeals, sitting in San Francisco, 3 particular black-robed judges, one of them named Richard Clifton, another one William Canby, and the third, Michelle Friedland, came out with their opinion today regarding the Trump travel stay. Now, people are calling it a travel ban. I called it a travel stay because the only people that were listed indefinitely until they can figure out how to process refugees from Syria, the stay was to be 90 to 120 days. So it wasn't. Number one, it's fake news when people tell you that it is an outright ban, which, of course, it is not. But that is the fashion in which leftist news, ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, blah, 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 all the American media maggots, as I like to call them, that's how they've composed this thing together. That's how they're selling it to the mainstream people that watch mainstream media news. When, in fact, it isn't. So, for that reason, I care to call it a stay, which pretty much it is. So that came out today. Not only did that kind of push things aside because I was going to talk about Senator Jeff Sessions and what a refreshing kind of thing that was. Honestly, I did not expect to hear or see him getting confirmed as quickly. I thought that the Democrats were going to be even more obstructionist, and we'd be looking at about another week, maybe another 2 weeks or so, before we had any kind of a return on that. So, no, the Ninth Circuit comes back with its 3 robed geniuses today, and they affirmed the ruling of Judge James Robot in the state of Washington regarding President Trump's immigrant, refugee travel stay. So what that means is that the Trump travel stay, in their opinion, has been held as unconstitutional and overturned. So what's the news saying about this anyway?
It's an ABC News special report. Now reporting, George Stephanopoulos.
And we are coming on the air right now because the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has made a ruling on whether or not to lift the hold on President Trump's travel ban from those 7 Muslim-majority nations. I want to go straight to our Supreme Court correspondent, Terry Moran, who's here. And, Terry, they have decided to leave that hold in place.
That's right. So as of right now, George, as of tonight, the appeals court in the Ninth Circuit has decided that President Trump's immigration ban for those 7 majority Muslim countries cannot go forward. It is halted. Everything is ground to a halt. President Trump loses at this stage. And right now, the courts are now going to take a closer look at everything. The reason the court did this is they said the government is not automatically going to win this thing. In fact, they cast some considerable doubt on President Trump's lawyer's argument that what he has done is lawful and in keeping with our immigration law. And they also said that if we allow this immigration ban in 7 majority Muslim countries to go forward, the state of Washington and the state of Minnesota, who brought this case, would be irreparably harmed. And so the harm is great. The likelihood of the government succeeding on this is not great. So the court said it's not going to go forward now.
So what is the harm? I'm going to tell you straight up. Mamba, if you happen to be listening to you, I'm going to ask you, what is the harm? Judge Robart did not specifically say, beyond the shadow of a doubt, what the kind of harm was going to occur to the state of Washington. And, of course, he enjoined the state of Michigan as well and made his ruling national. So what are you saying about what is harm? Dave Milner, that's nice. You're not spelling it correctly, though. Please come back.
So I'll take a deep breath and take a very close look.
And that means the district courts will now keep looking at the underlying executive order.
Precisely. They'll have basically a trial. That's what district courts are for. Their job is to take the case at first. They're going to hear evidence. They're going to the judge there, Judge Robarts, will hear evidence. He'll hear argument, and then he will say, okay, now I've got the full picture of what the president intended to do, of whether that squares with our law, and how it affects the state of Washington and Minnesota.
Meantime, this decision to deny the stay can be appealed to the Supreme Court?
It can. This is something the government must decide really on short order, whether or not this is so important that they want to take it to the Supreme Court. The person who makes that decision, President Donald Trump, and he's not known to back down from a fight. The problem is on the Supreme Court, it's 4-4. There's only 8 justices since his nominee hasn't been confirmed.
And therein lies the problem. That is absolutely the problem. The court is split philosophically 4-4. When Scalia was in there, the philosophical split was indeed 4-4, but the sort of the casting vote that would decide many crucial cases was by Kennedy, by Justice Kennedy. Well, now he's part of who knows where the hell he's going to go. Sometimes he leans left. Occasionally he leans right. You can't always pigeonhole him. So that's the exact point. Now you do know, everybody does know, Donald Trump will take this to the Supreme Court. Don't doubt that aspect.
So if there's a tie up there, this decision, which called a halt to this order, will remain in place until that trial happens.
Okay, Tara Moran, thanks very much. I'm going to go to our chief White House correspondent, John Carl. No word yet from the White House on what they're going to do. We heard President Trump's statements taking on the Seattle judge who put the stay in place.
The so-called judge, as he called it. Look, they will certainly appeal. Whether or not they appeal the decision to stop this halt or whether or not they just go through with their appeal on the underlying case will be seen. But, George, remember, this executive order was signed on January 27th. It is a temporary executive order, a temporary travel ban, 90 days. The refugee ban is 120 days. The Syria refugee ban is permanent. But the rest of this, the clock is already ticking. And if this stay remains in place, if this restraining order remains in place through the course of this legal challenge, pretty soon there's not much time left.
90 days for it to go all the way through the courts. But, and there's also some word that the administration might take another look at this executive order, make changes.
Make some changes, because remember how quickly this was put together. We've even heard from the Secretary of Homeland Security, John Kelly, that he should have taken more time, should have slowed this down. The president clearly knew that this was coming. He called this 3-judge panel that ruled on this disgraceful, called their arguments disgraceful.
Well, I completely concur. They are disgraceful. I'm sure Mamba and I will chat about that in a bit. But there is law in effect, and this court is not looking at it. It's not considering it. It is extremely, for me, frustrating.
Even before they issued their decision. So I'm sure this is not coming as a surprise to the White House tonight. They will fight for this ban, and if if it gets knocked down, they will try again.
Okay, but for right now, we know that the hold on President Trump's travel ban will stay in place. That's the decision of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Much more coming up on World News Tonight with David Muir. Have a good evening.
So the New York Post.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
Thank you. So the New York Post wrote today, Federal Appeals Court rules against Trump's travel ban. A federal appeals court on Thursday unanimously upheld a judge's order that slammed the brakes on President Trump's temporary refugee and immigration ban. The stunning, in many ways, it's stunning to the left and it's stunning to the right. The stunning 3-0 ruling, because it was in fact unanimous, by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco means the travel ban, which caused chaos and massive protests, and yet it did. It caused lots of protests at airports across the U.S., won't take effect. The president responded with a tweet. Of course, he will always respond with a tweet. That's what he does. Promising to challenge the ruling. See you in court. The security of our nation is at stake. Well, with that, I completely wholeheartedly agree. It is. We'll talk further about that. The case will likely go all the way to the Supreme Court. And when you see and hear that, you have to realize that what the other individual already said on ABC News, that's going to be a crucial stake in the event. The three judges who heard the government appeal of the order were Democrat appointments, William Canby and Michelle Friedland, and GOP appointee Richard Clifton. So, on one hand, I am surprised that it took the Ninth quite some time to craft its opinion. I was hoping that because of the day or two that it took, that they were actually considering the lawful obligations and were considering the arguments of the federal government. Now, this is very interesting because later on I've got some audio coming up of the questions, and you can hear the nature, the tone, the intonations of the justices in the court as they ask their questions, and the exchange goes back and forth between themselves and the government attorneys involved. On the other hand, I have to say, the opinion is completely, if you pay attention, in keeping with the leftist, very leftist nature of the court.
We now
itself.
have a Fox News alert. We have gotten word from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco. They have upheld the lower court ruling from Washington State putting a temporary restraining order on President Trump's travel ban, the ban that limited travel from 7 largely Muslim countries into the U.S. by anybody trying to visit, and also suspension of all travel by refugees into this country, especially from Syria, an indefinite stay there. So, again, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has upheld the lower court ruling suspending President Trump's ban. There had been some indications in the very critical questions that judges asked the government lawyer in the case that they had some real doubts about the government's argument that this was a key case, but you can know that this is now going to become a huge issue. President Trump said, and his supporters said, that he was acting well within his powers as president to make decisions about immigration, which is specifically granted to him in the Constitution, and also to make decisions about national security, and that he felt to continue this travel from these 7 largely Muslim countries and to continue the entry by refugees into the country was a threat to national security. Now the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is saying that it is not persuaded by that, and therefore the temporary restraining order on the president's travel ban stays in order. Now the question is, from the White House, will President Trump appeal this to the Supreme Court, or will he let the temporary restraining order stand and go back to the lower court in the federal district court in Washington state and argue again about the merits of this? Remember, all the judge did in that case, it's a lot, but all he did was put a temporary restraining order to stop enforcement of the travel ban by President Trump. Now that restraint, that temporary restraining order, stays in effect. Let me ask my producer, where are we going to go here on this? Pardon?
I know where you're going to go. You're going to go back to me. So, as you recall, it was lower court judge James Robot in the state of Washington who temporarily halted the stay after stating that Washington and Minnesota were likely to win their case and had shown that the ban would restrict travel by their residents, damage their public universities, and reduce their tax base. Okay. All right. That was their contention. So, the unanimous decision means that the case does, in fact, go to the Supreme Court or back to Robot's court. If you go to my blog, there's a link where you can read the entire opinion. It's 29 pages. It's not 3 or 4 pages. It's rather lengthy. Jay Sekulow. I don't know if you ever listened to Jay Sekulow. He's all through the United States on radio. And he's from the American Center for Law and Justice. It's a conservative Christian organization that filed an appeals court brief in support of the Trump's ban. Jay Sekulow said, "This decision is disappointing and clearly puts our nation in grave danger. The fact is that President Trump clearly has the constitutional and statutory authority to issue this order. A little bit later, I'll tell you why. It's clear radical Islamic terrorists are at war with America. President Trump's order is a proper and constitutional way to protect Americans." Jessica Levinson, a law professor at Loyola Law School in Los Angeles, said, however, "It's really important that the opinion is unanimous because judges that were appointed by Democratic and Republican presidents came to the same legal conclusion. This is probably going to the Supreme Court, but I don't think it's going anywhere good for Donald Trump, even if the Supreme Court rules along party lines and is deadlocked because the lower court's decision would stand." We've talked about that before as well. A portion, if you've read it, a portion of the Ninth's opinion reads this way. "To rule on the government's motion, we must consider several factors, including whether the government has shown that it is likely to succeed on the merits of its appeal, the degree of hardship caused by a stay or its denial, and the public interest in granting or denying a stay. We assess those factors in light of the limited evidence put forward by both parties of this very preliminary stage, and are mindful that our analysis of the hardships and public interest in this case involves particularly sensitive and weighty concerns on both sides." Well, yes, granted. Nevertheless, we hold that the government has not shown a likelihood of its success on the merits of its appeal, nor has it shown that failure to enter a stay would cause irreparable injury. That's a very important phrase, irreparable injury. And we therefore deny its emergency motion for a stay. So, I submit that a great deal of insight can be gleaned, like I said, by listening to the tone and the tenor of the 3 Ninth Circuit judges. I believe I have that video coming. In any event, if you listen to that, and as a matter of fact, you know what? I don't have it here, but when I break at the bottom of the hour, I'm going to pull up that video. And you guys can listen to the fashion in which it was crafted, because they take a hostile. In my opinion, they take a hostile tone with the attorneys, and so it makes me wonder. Okay, were the arguments of the government cogent, or had they not considered their audience? The audience being 3 black-robed individuals on the 9th District Court of Appeals. I have some very serious questions about that. So, like I said, it's no surprise at all that Democrats and leftists nationwide, they're thrilled to no end by the decision, and they're going to use it as a rallying cry to continue to obstruct President Trump and his administration on every level. And so, as also a number of people have pointed out all through the conservative media, but it doesn't make it not true. Apparently 8 USC 1182 makes little difference to federal courts, as I wrote in a post about 2 weeks ago when Trump had his stay. It met some opposition. And so what I was attempting to illustrate, like everybody was at the time, is that under 8 U.S.C. 1182, a president does in fact have the ability to do exactly what it is that President Trump did. Also, there's something known as the McCarran-Walter Act. It's the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, and it reads like this: suspension or entry or imposition of restrictions by the president whenever the president finds that the entry of aliens or of any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States. The president may, by proclamation and for such a period as he shall deem necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens or immigrants or non-immigrants, or impose any restrictions on the entry of aliens he may deem to be appropriate. Now, I know we're getting down to a lot of minutia. And a lot of this stuff some people may consider to be navel-gazing. And perhaps if the techno gods shine down on me tonight and White Mamba does in fact get through, we can discuss the situation in a fashion to make things a little bit more plain. So when I deal in these kinds of details, in my opinion, it's highly important. These are things that very few shows have the ability, because they're festooned with advertising, but they cover a particular topic for a minute or 2 minutes and they move on to something else. At least here, I have the ability to, if I want to make the entire hour or the entire 2 hours on a given topic, I have the freedom to do so. And for that, I thank Sackheads and SHR Media. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to have to try to look for that video. I'm not sure that I can find it in the amount of time that I've got for the break coming up. I'll tell you what, I'm going to have to zip quick like a bunny. And we're going to play a break here at the bottom of the hour. And when we come back, with luck crossing my fingers, I'll have the video for you. And perhaps we'll also be talking to White Mamba. I'm very, very curious what he thinks about all of this. Yes, Dave, I will check my laptop's battery power, but here's the problem. As it was encountered with you, this laptop is plugged into shore power. All right. Anyway, hang on. We'll be back in about, say, 3 minutes or so, and I'm going to do some quick looking. Please don't go away.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Breaking news. According to the latest report coming out of SHR Media, a merchandise store to support both the Reaver of Common Sense and SHR Media has just been unleashed to the general public. Be forewarned that this site can be contagious and numerous items can be purchased to support the best news programming. Go to Reaver.one website and click on the store link to check out the merchandise.
Hello, I'm Matt, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is Hillsdale President Larry Arnn on the continuing relevance of the Constitution.
Many argue today that the Constitution is outdated because it addresses problems peculiar to the 18th century. Some parts of the Constitution do read rather quaintly. Consider the injunction against titles of nobility in Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. But is that so outdated? The purpose of the injunction is to prevent the government granting special privileges to some for partisan reasons. This strikes at the heart of the rule of law. The crony capitalism so common today is a place where the government bestows favors and tax dollars on some businesses to give them a leg up over others. This is exactly the kind of thing the Constitution was meant to prohibit. The Constitution is not so outdated after all.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.com.
Times are dark. The people misled by corrupt politicians, lied to by establishment media, and deceived by the false messages of Islam. A nation in confusion needs a guide. It needs a man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker, SHR Media, High Plains Talk Radio, Live Rebooting Liberty, and YouTube for a unique brand of commentary on the unpleasant blind guide. Because truth is not always pleasant.
In a world controlled by corrupt politicians.
You got a business. You didn't build that.
A team of ordinary men emerge from the ashes to give voice to the voiceless and hope to the hopeless. Sackhead Sean.
Dude, I'm not saying Cap was stupid, bro.
Sackhead Clint.
All good friends of ours usually show up drunk.
Also starring Sako as the producer.
I'm a little bit drunk, cause I'm drinking.
They are the Sackheads Radio Show. Every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific on SHRmedia.com.
Beware, the Jersey Takeover is here. Every Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can catch the Reaver of Common Sense show, hosted by Jersey Joe, right here on SHRmedia.com and HighPlainsDailyNews.com. Only Jersey can deliver hell like no one else, so consider this your fair warning.
Conservative media done right.
You're listening to right now.
The SHR
travel ban appeals here in the state of Washington.
And we're back. All right, we're going to try this. This defeated me once before with regard to Dave Milner. However, I see that I did answer the phone, and with luck and crossed phalanges, do we have White Mamba on the line? All right, this is not looking good.
Hello?
Oh, wait. I hear a voice.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can, in fact, hear you. How about you and me?
Yes, I can hear you a little bit muted, but it's coming through fine enough.
Okay. I wish there were a way that I could jack up the volume on both sides.
Am I barely coming through here?
Okay. So you hear me enough to be able to conduct a conversation then?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Great. Did you make anything out of the delay between the time the Ninth Circuit got the information and the arguments were made and the time that they issued an opinion? Did that mean anything in particular to you?
Well, personally, I thought that they were going to ship this thing back down to the district court because it was a ruling on a TRO. A TRO itself is pretty extreme in that it's an emergency and an exceptional type of request. So I figured they would wait until the preliminary injunction stage to make any type of a substantive ruling on the case. I basically thought that it was going to wind up back down with Judge Robart. They were going to go through the mess with getting a preliminary injunction ruling and then appealing that back to the Ninth Circuit. So when this came out today, as I mentioned in chat, of course, being my lawyerly prepared self, I went through and made bunches of notes and spent many hours on this whole thing. And it turns out they come out and issue an opinion, which I've had about 20 minutes to look at during the time of your show here with my Diet Cherry Dr. Pepper, and now I'm calling in. So you're getting a really great witness here to question.
Well, the other thing is, though, however, the great divider is the fact that you are an attorney, and of course I am not, nor do I play one on television. So
Well, I just play one on TV, but I do have a license. Yeah.
Okay, well,
so
see,
none
now...
of this constitutes a legal opinion. Let me give you my disclaimer. So,
Okay.
get somebody qualified, licensed in your state. You know all that routine, but I certainly don't want the Florida bar coming breathing down my neck over calling into BZ's show. And believe it or not, these are the types of things that some lawyers just have nothing better to do but to jump down other people's throats for doing things like this. So it doesn't constitute a legal opinion. I'm just a guy calling in who happens to know some things about the law and trying to give insight to my friends.
Okay, disclaimer.
Anyway, I want to give a shout-out to Dave. I want to give a shout-out to Patriot 1776. Everyone out there who's been a good friend of mine on Twitter. Of course, all the Sackheads folks and anybody else who might be listening.
Now, you're in Florida, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And it's going to be 38 degrees tonight where I'm at in Florida, by the way.
38 degrees?
Yeah,
wow.
It's freezing down here. It was 80 yesterday afternoon, so we're in the 30s tonight. So it's this type of weather swing in this part of North Florida during this time of the year.
Wow, because it's raining like crazy and it's really windy out there. All right, now.
And it looks like...
of course. Let's go back, if we can, to Judge Robot's opinion. Now, well, I'll tell you what. Let's go back even further than that. When Donald Trump wrote his executive order, was there anything in terms of the media and what you did hear and read about it that particularly stepped out to you and said, oh, gosh, this is absolutely unconstitutional, or he's going to have a huge problem with this?
No, not really at all. The only thing that I believe it was in Section 5C of the order, and it looks like the court, or at least the state of Washington's Attorney General, Solicitor General mentioned about I think it was a 5C provision about only allowing when the refugee program does resume to only allow religious minorities to get preference, which, of course, in the countries that were on the list were largely Muslim to begin with. So that showed some type of a religious preference that could have probably been worded better in saying, okay, well, we're going to allow, persecuted religious groups. It was kind of worded in a way that, could have been crafted better for that language to not sound like it was getting at some type of a religious-based discrimination, which the breadth of the order really wasn't. It was obviously not directed, specifically at the Muslim people per se, because it excluded, as you discussed before, it only applied to 8% of the world's Muslims potentially. So I don't really see anything about the order that was horrendous. I just think maybe parts of it also could have been worded better in terms of it was essentially an order that was saying let's halt immigration until we can get our policy and our procedures clear for checking these people who are coming in. Let's shut off the water spigot until we can set up effective screening. And of course, let's put an indefinite ban on Syria because we have no clue right now. We can't say within 90 days what's going to happen when this government report comes back, because I doubt they have very good information whatsoever on what's going on with the Syrian refugees, and probably won't for quite some time, if ever. So I didn't see anything ridiculously wrong with the executive order, and what I did want to mention was that the opinion in the Massachusetts case by the district court judge was a much better crafted opinion, and it pared away at some of those things about people who already had entered the U.S., they couldn't be sent back, people who had already been screened effectively, had different types of visas that, already had a record with INS being able to get in. But I thought that that's what the function of the court would have been, was to say, hey, look, let's not make this thing, into some type of a constitutional versus unconstitutional or a rallying cry case for religious persecution or whatever it might be. But let's just go back and pair some of these things where, maybe there could have been a better fit. Maybe some people were being kept out of the country who certainly weren't going to be a threat. Professors, people who, already been in and out of here. But this thing's taken on a life of its own. Like I've mentioned before, I think this is becoming the OJ case of for federal court geeks like me. So every day I wake up and I see something new in this, and I really don't know what's going on right now. I thought I had a grip on it, and here I am today, and I go, well, it looks like the Ninth Circuit is something that I don't know what they're trying to do here.
Well, like normal for the Ninth, that it's like they're pulling crap out of their arse. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking to White Mamba, Esquire, who is a practicing attorney, holds a bar card from the state of Florida, and he is helping us analyze what just went on with the Ninth Circuit. We're also talking about Judge Robot, who particularly answered Donald Trump in a negative fashion, to which was then sent up to the Ninth District Circus of Appeals, Ninth District Circus Court, so to speak.
Oh, the Circus Court. I like that.
To your recollection, and I think the contention was originally that Donald Trump had not addressed properly the issue of people already essentially lawful holding green cards in this. Was that a particular issue that you had heard about? That, at least in terms of the media was trying to say that because of all the chaos that was occurring at the airports, that people with green cards were being told, no, you can't come back. No, basically in other countries, you can't even step onto the damn airplane. Was there anything?
That's a really good question. I in all of the arguments and opinions that I've read on this case, I mean, the actual authority from the district court and the circuit court, I didn't see anything in or hear anything in the arguments. And if you've listened to the arguments, which I trust you have as well, I didn't hear green cards come up at all. Unless it was something that was being denied to the people who had green cards in effect by security. But I maybe the opinion, I believe it was it Massachusetts again, may have addressed that people were kind of being blanketed, saying, well, you can't come in. And then the court stepped in and said, look, these people have valid green cards. This executive order doesn't apply to them. And there are exclusions in the executive order if you read it. It's pretty well done in that it's basically allows for people who have certain types of visas to enter. It's not a blanket order saying anybody from these countries can't come in. It specifically, excludes certain people from the protection, from the treatment of that. I mean, it's essentially a ban, if you want to call it a travel ban, which I guess you could word it better in terms of the way the media, I'm just used to calling it that. Essentially, that's saying we need to get our immigration policies in order. I mean, it's, if you want to continue to have a country with borders, you want to have some say, which you do have as the federal government over who comes in or out of our country, then we need to have this state till we can at least figure it out and get these reports back from these other countries and see who's going to comply with the proper information before we start allowing people in. And that's certainly, to me, according to the statutes that we've seen in the U.S. Code, it's well within the president's power to do that. And what disturbs me is how this case, one, why it was even taken up by the district court on standing grounds, which I'm sure you may have some questions about there.
Yes.
And secondly, how this thing wound up becoming a written opinion here by the circuit court by the Circuit Court of Appeals, and where it's going to go from here. So listening to the arguments, I really gleaned a lot about this process in this case, but I think this is really an exceptional type of a thing that we have going on here that really, again, I think we got another OJ case here.
Another contention was that does that original judge in Washington, Judge Robot, have the ability to make this a blanket case all across the nation, and not just for the and again, it goes back to standing, but apparently the Ninth Circuit thinks it does, but it was precedent set, in other words, by this Washington judge declaring that his opinion is held nationwide and everyone must fall under its sway.
Well, I was talking with somebody yesterday at a Bible study group that I attended about that. We mentioned a little bit about, just discussed quickly about the case before we got into some other things. And in a sense, I can understand why, and don't shoot me down on this, folks, why he may have wanted to apply it nationwide, in the sense that, if you're going to have a ruling against an immigration order and it's only going to apply in one state, well then, okay, let's open the floodgates in this one state, and then everybody else can go under the executive order. So there is, a hard way. I mean, the whole idea behind immigration and naturalization in the Constitution is that Congress has the right to establish a uniform rule of that, in that, we don't have 50 different states with 50 different immigration laws. It has to be universal. But the counter-argument, and the argument that makes more sense to people, is that you can't have one court in one district with a state of Washington claiming that their economic interests are hurt, or all these other standing issues. They can't get their professors into the universities, and the universities are suffering irreparable harm because of all of this. That, you can argue, well, why aren't the other 50 states doing this? Do you see cases like this being filed in Texas, where Texas is saying, well, we have irreparable harm because we can't get our Syrian or our Iranian computer programmer to co-work at some tech firm here. No. So, yeah, I thought it was kind of a bit of a reach for the judge to kind of go out and to make that some type of a nationwide applicability to his order. But, it's sort of like in for a dime, in for a dollar. There is a rationale for him to do that, because he was making a ruling in this type of a case for on an immigration matter, and the rationale is that these types of things are supposed to be uniform and apply across the board. So I don't think he had the power to make the ruling that he did, and just the fact that he, the scope of it was expanded so far, certainly has turned this thing into, again, something that's affecting the whole nation. So now we're kind of at the mercy of the Ninth Circuit and this opinion. And I think now the political machinations are going to really, start to grind. Does the executive branch craft another order? Do we just say, we're going to just screen everybody who comes in from these countries and get into some type of, say, yes, you have the right to enter, but we're going to have to validate, every piece of information on you before we, are there other ways now that the president can go about enforcing his policy other than through this executive order? That's kind of the question that I have, is now what does the White House do? Even if, this litigation gets held up in the Supreme Court, which it sounds like it's going to go there, if it becomes a 4-4 tie, who knows? If Judge Gorsuch will be affirmed by then, or be confirmed by then, that turns this into another political, type of a thing. Now we've got, a justice in the wings, who I believe will be an excellent justice. We've got this ruling on this TRO of all things. So I don't know. Actually, I don't know if at this point the court's going to consider the preliminary injunction, because this TRO is supposed to be in effect for how long?
Yes, it's limited. Yeah, TROs stand
so
for...
what happens here? Does the time run out on the TRO, and then this thing goes back down, and there's a hearing on a preliminary injunction, and then we wind up again with another appeal of that, whichever way it comes out. And, because essentially what the court did here, too, with this TRO, in reading the parts of the opinion that I've read and listening to the arguments, was that they considered it for essentially a lot like it was already a granted preliminary injunction for purposes of adjudicating on it. If you look into the opinion, they said, well, they got into the questions about the four-part test, about the concrete and particularized, or the irreparable harm if we don't grant this order. So they basically were kind of saying, well, even at this preliminary stage of the proceedings, that they more or less said, okay, we've got standing, we've got some type of an injury here, and we've got to step in and do something.
Here's what
that's going to be interesting to see what else comes in after this.
Do you think there's some sort of, and my opinion is that there is a major disconnect between the intent behind the executive order and how it's interpreted by the courts? Trump et al. Are looking at this in terms of how do we keep Americans safe? It gets thrown out into the ozone. It gets interpreted, ends up over in that court, and now it's nothing but legal navel-gazing. Now, I'm not trying to diminish attorneys, but I'm suggesting that perhaps there's a major disconnect between the intent of what came out of D.C. under Trump as, I don't know, I am not an attorney. I can't say it's the worst crafted thing imaginable, but it seems to me and a lot of people across the nation that there's a huge disconnect, that the courts don't seem to understand the issue of security when they're deciding that they're going to shut this down. Further, in terms of precedent, other presidents have done this before. Jimmy Carter has done this before. Obama did this before. And now all of a sudden people are wondering, okay, now it's illegal. Why?
Yeah, those are fantastic points. I guess you can say the courts, their first goal is going to be, or should be, realistically about applying law correctly in the case. They can't get too much into what they think about the security of the country and such and such. But obviously it's a big policy concern that they have to, be able to, interpret these. Well, I won't go so far as to say interpret. I mean, that's a tough question. I guess what I'm saying is that I believe you've probably not, I don't have a high estimation, unfortunately, of quite lawyers are some of the worst lawyers are the worst people I've ever met. Some of the best lawyers are the best people I've ever met. It's hit or miss. I think it was really a matter of the way that these cases were brought before these courts. And you got a little bit into this whole idea of forum shopping in some of your previous discussions. I think you basically had a very, pro-Islam, pro-immigration solicitor from Washington State coming in with all of these arguments about damages and trying to get standing. And he did I will say this, look at it this way. If you listen to the oral arguments, I think the government was taken off guard. Would you agree with that in listening through that? I don't think that they expected this type of a response.
No, I was
from the district court.
In the break, I was trying to find the video that I'd located before, which is back at my house, and I listened to that one for a while. And it had the audio between, I can't think of a name, but the female Michelle, whose last name escapes me, arguing in front of these three jurists in San Francisco, and the questions being thrown to them were, in my opinion, rather hostile on their account. Now, of course, they were making the attorneys representing, yes. And so, to me, the tone that was used to the government attorney was frequently much different to that of the other the people that were arguing their case as well. To me, that said quite a bit when I was listening to it. I tried to find the damn video, and I just couldn't.
I have it. I can post it in chat when when I have the chance here. I obviously have the volume down and I'm sitting at the computer right now. But I listened to that last night. That was the oral argument, the one without the video before the circuit court that you're referring to, before the three-judge panel.
Right, the ninth.
Yeah,
the one that I was listening.
I was surprised at the way. My gosh, all three of the justices, two of which were appointed by
Democrats.
I think one was a Carter appointee, one was an Obama appointee. The newest one, female, was an Obama appointee, and the other one goes all the way back to I think Bush. If I'm not mistaken.
Yes, you're correct. It was a Bush appointee.
And but the tone of, they just kind of came out and started scowling at both sides, I thought. The lower court, when I listened to it, at first I thought, wow, he thought this thing was kind of a joke. I thought he was doing a bad cop, good cop routine on the government attorney and saying, well, why should we hear this case? Was kind of going out of his way to kind of be mean to the guy and scowling, and then he came out with a ruling after... I thought he kind of had his mind made up almost in the
Yes.
he ruled from the bench.
Yes, because
I read half of his opinion at the bench. If you listen to the very end, he said, I'm going to give an oral ruling. I don't know if they took a break in between that, but he literally read three-quarters of his opinion and said, well, this is going to come out further in the written opinion, and then they added on the extra little pieces that they wanted to kind of have to hold it all together. So I don't know how common that is. I've not really practiced, in federal court. Other than as an extern and being around federal courts when I was in law school, having access that way and going in and listening in on hearings and things of that nature and working on habeas corpus stuff and different types of, government cases, but just from a student perspective. But it did seem odd, like you said. I think there's something to the tone that both courts took.
Okay, White Mamba, one question before the break, because I'm gonna have to break here at the top of the hour. One question for you. Well, first, are you interested in coming back after the break, or do you have to go?
Yeah,
I understand if you have to take off.
Yeah, I'm sure. If you guys want to hear me, I'm certainly willing to give you my 2 cents here.
Okay, because I have a few more questions. If it's all right with you, maybe I can carry you over to 15 minutes after the hour, if that's all right with you, sir.
Sure. Should I hold on to the line here?
Yeah, just hold on to the line. You'll hear everything, and then you'll hear me come back in, and I'll start the show, and we'll ask you another question. But one final question for you to consider before we hit the break is this that I have for you. Did the argument of the government before the Ninth Circuit, did they make the wrong argument to them? Did they not suss out their audience? Did they not consider who these people were? So if you would, think about that during the break. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be coming right back. Thank you for being in chat. Thank you for listening live. Thank you for listening to the podcast. We're talking to White Mamba Esquire. He is, in fact, an attorney from the state of Florida. He is weighing in. And, folks, we will be right back. Thank you.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Breaking news. According to the latest report coming out of SHR Media, a merchandise store to support both the Reaver of Common Sense and SHR Media has just been unleashed to the general public. Be forewarned that this site can be contagious and numerous items can be purchased to support the best news programming. Go to Reaver.one website and click on the store link to check out the merchandise.
Hello, I'm Matt, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is Hillsdale President Larry Arnn on the continuing relevance of the Constitution.
Many argue today that the Constitution is outdated because it addresses problems peculiar to the 18th century. Some parts of the Constitution do read rather quaintly. Consider the injunction against titles of nobility in Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. But is that so outdated? The purpose of the injunction is to prevent the government granting special privileges to some for partisan reasons. This strikes at the heart of the rule of law. The crony capitalism so common today is a place where the government bestows favors and tax dollars on some businesses to give them a leg up over others. This is exactly the kind of thing the Constitution was meant to prohibit. The Constitution is not so outdated after all.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.com.
Times are dark. The people misled by corrupt politicians, lied to by establishment media, and deceived by the false messages of Islam. A nation in confusion needs a guide. It needs a man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker, SHR Media, High Plains Talk Radio, Live Rebooting Liberty, and YouTube for a unique brand of commentary on the unpleasant blind guide. Because truth is not always pleasant.
In a world controlled by corrupt politicians,
You got a business. That you didn't build that.
a team of ordinary men emerge from the ashes to give voice to the voiceless and hope to the hopeless. Sackhead Sean.
Dude, I'm not saying half was stupid, bro.
Sackhead Clint.
All good friends of ours usually show up drunk.
Also starring Sako as the producer.
I'm a little bit drunk, I'm a little bit drunk, 'cause I'm drinking, drinking, drinking.
They are the Sackheads Radio Show. Every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific on SHRmedia.com.
Beware, the Jersey Takeover is here. Every Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can catch the Reverb Common Sense Show, hosted by Jersey Joe, right here on SHRmedia.com and HighPlainsDailyNews.com. Only Jersey can deliver hell like no one else, so consider this your fair warning.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, live and direct from BZ Sierra Nevada Airy in occupied California, doing the job the American media maggots won't, featuring right thinking from a left brain, working without a net and under an assassination order. Here is the bloviating Zeppelin.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the top of the hour. It's the Thursday Berserk Bobcat Saloon show from the bloviating Zeppelin called The Aftermath, in which we talk about all the other shite that I couldn't get stuffed into this big blivet from Tuesday. Also, thank you for listening. Thank you for replaying me. Thank you for the podcast. Thank you for appearing in chat. Mary Brockman. Thank you to all the people that are in there right now, and thank you for listening. We have on the line White Mamba, who is an attorney from the state of Florida, who is called, he has an Esquire, Esquire, after his name. And before the break, I had asked him a question similar to this. As the government was arguing in front of the Ninth Circuit Court, and they since came out with a ruling that trashed Trump's travel ban, as the government was arguing in front of the Ninth Circuit justices who were there, all three of them, sir, were they making the wrong argument?
That's a good question. As I mentioned before, I thought that the government was taken a bit off, obviously the federal government, in this case, since they were arguing against the state government. I thought the government was taken a bit off guard.
Right.
I felt like they went back to the same types of arguments that they did in the district court, in that they were pushing the idea of standing. I think that they felt that the order was going to be, I had written down here, basically that they were saying, okay, the last thing I'd written on this ain't going to the United States Supreme Court in its current form. Gonna get an opinion by the Ninth Circuit and fame grab, or they're going to kick it down to the district court. So we got the opinion. When we got on I thought that everybody was biting on the bit that the 7 countries banned, if you picked up in the arguments, haven't committed terrorism in the U.S. The courts kept saying, oh, well, can you show to us where, since 9/11, which of these nations have had terrorists in our country who've committed terrorist acts? And the government was kind of like, well, there was a case in blah, blah, blah. And, I think that they could have been better prepared, because there's certainly been people apprehended on conspiracies and plans that have been thwarted. But it looked like that's what they were trying to, the government kind of came in saying, this is an executive order. These are the ways that they're given fairly wide latitude. The president is acting according to the Youngstown case at the height of his powers, because he has approval by Congress to preside, or not preside, but to make executive orders regarding the uniform rule of immigration. That's something that's well within his power to do that through the executive agencies that, he can direct. And yeah, it seems like the government kind of stuck with this, with trying to fight the standing issue and trying to say that the president has the authority to do this, and essentially almost say that this is not reviewable by the courts.
Yes, I heard that. Wasn't that really, when you're thinking about in terms of human behavior, wasn't that actually the wrong thing for the government to say to those 3 individuals up there? Didn't they take a little offense at someone trying to tell them their jobs?
Well, there you go. I think that the courts jumped in, and the state, I think, in their rebuttal, jumped in and said, well, look, we have cases where they kept saying, well, we can't look beyond the 4 corners of the document itself, which is kind of its own legalese of saying, So yeah, I think that the government needed to make a showing. I haven't looked at any of the AMSI briefs, which I usually don't read, by the millions of people. If you look at the site that I gave you for who was it that wrote the council on this, the council on that, everybody had to weigh in. I kind of wish people like Pam Geller at AFDI or some of these other groups that are up on it was able to kind of get some documentation on the threat itself from these countries and from the places that have harbored Islamic threats towards the U.S. and certainly, would have gotten some of that before the court and say, hey, look, here's the harm to be weighed against by not, putting this stay on, again, see, the legal machinations are incredible in this, in that they have me tongue-tied, and they have everybody tongue-tied in that. What I'm concerned about, and I know this gets a little off the point, is this going to become a trend now, that every time an executive order comes out, that there's some misinformed uproar about, is this going to have to go get weighed in one of the 94 districts? Depending upon which district you get to bring this in, you have a better shot of getting a judge that's going to look at this thing your way in a more liberal court. And is this going to just constantly be this type of a thing now, where the courts are basically, in a sense, they're opining themselves out of relevancy, because maybe the executive branch is going to just turn around now and, okay, well, we're just going to kind of go rogue on our own way and not really, we were looking at your order here and we're saying, okay, well, we're going to have to lift this. We're going to have to put a hold on this executive order. Well, we'll just issue another one, or we'll just direct the department to screen people, vigorously at these airports coming in from any country, and we'll just essentially do what we should be doing. We'll just profile, and when anybody comes in, we're gonna run them through the, like I've mentioned before. I think it would be a wonderful idea to have somebody, and I certainly put my name in the hat to adjudicate these cases right on the border, to where you have somebody, if they want to notice in the hearing, well, if they come in and they're suspect, then let's just have the hearing right here. See if your papers are straight, we'll detain you. If you are allowed to enter, you're allowed to enter. If you're not, you're not. It might come down to some type of a almost, I don't want to call it military, but it might just come down to an enforcement issue. As you well know, with your law enforcement experience, you've heard the old adage, a law is only as good as its enforcement. So maybe the executive's going to turn around and say, okay, well, we've got all your legal machinations here, and you don't want to, accept what my role is here as, to protect the people of the United States and to put America first and all this. Well, we're just going to go ahead and we're just going to enforce what we think we should be enforcing, and who's going to stop us? Are you going to come out with your black robes and tell immigration agents now that we're just not going to extreme vet people? Are you going to come out there and say, let this guy in, don't let this guy in for us? So there might be that aspect of this that really, can turn this thing into some kind of a jungle. So
that's exactly it.
That was just another thought.
Yeah, that's a precise concern that I have. Those 3 points. 1, judge shopping. Number 2, executive orders. As Mary Brackman points out in chat, all of Obama's executive orders pretty much stood, I think, except for one with regard to immigration, and that particular judge took it on a national foot as well. But it makes me wonder if from now on it's going to be, I'm going to war by executive order, and every executive order that comes out, some leftist or Democrat somewhere is going to be fighting them. Is this the new normal? I was exactly questioning that. Ladies and gentlemen, also, we're continuing to talk to White Mamba, who is an attorney from the state of Florida, and I've asked him to weigh in here today with opinions about what occurred recently in the Ninth Circuit's Court of Appeal. Oh, did I say Ninth Circus? I'm afraid I did. In the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal. And so let me test your brain here just for a little bit. You've read, I'm guessing, the opinion. You know how things are settling down now. Tomorrow is going to be huge. Since the opinion was given today, all the pundits are going to be weighing in tomorrow, and all the legal minds, etc., are going to be spewing whatever bile they have to say about this particular opinion. Do you, sir, see this going one particular way over another? In other words, back to Washington, or do you see it, all right, we're gonna send it over to SCOTUS? My thought is, you better not send it over to SCOTUS, because you just don't have your SCOTUS nominee confirmed yet. Do you have any insight or thoughts as to what you think? Okay, what's next?
At this point, I've learned that the old adage, as one of the clerks that I worked with when I was working for the liberal U.S. magistrate that I worked with, was actually a pretty good judge, despite. Anyway, point being, like the X-Files, trust no one. Those words that were spoken, I don't know what to think at this point. Honestly, I did just get a chance to look at the opinion quickly, so I haven't completely digested what's going on here. I want to go through it, read it a bit more carefully, and then see what's going on, what some other legal experts think, and see what kind of cases they're citing here and what the government is saying that they plan to do at this point. I'm assuming that, they're in this to win it. So, yes. And now you get into Supreme Court jurisdiction. I still think that what Judge Napolitano said, and certainly, is his smart as anybody when it comes to these things, although I believe he was a state court judge. So when you get into these types of federal court cases, these things really become sanitized and take on a life of their own, beyond the immediate facts. It's almost like a surreal type of an experience that these things, their real world applicability kind of goes out the window, and it becomes a matter of everybody's politics and everybody's view of the history of these things. And somewhere along the line, what gets left out is, protecting ourselves, protecting our borders, and stopping the influx of people that we don't properly vet and that we probably don't have the means yet of properly vetting. That was the whole idea behind this executive order to begin with.
Agreed. Yep.
Let's please shut this down so we can get these procedures in place, get information from these countries, and if these countries don't comply, then we can continue to say, look, you can't come in here. That was the whole idea behind it. I think that was lost in the executive order, and that it wasn't just this, we don't want you in our countries. We can't screen you people in these places. We don't have reliable information, so we have to, of necessity, shut the immigration down here. We can't be plugging up one hole with one finger and plugging up another hole and plugging up another hole. So, it was the intent behind it was good, and it was a fairly well-crafted opinion, but fairly well-crafted executive order. I think the government just kind of expected the courts to kind of say, well, we don't really have much to say here. That's the executive's prerogative. He's acting within his power. And then when this case kind of came, they were able to establish that threshold thing. Getting back to Napolitano, he felt, and I felt, that it was going to be shot down on standing ground, that they did not have standing to bring this case as a state on behalf of its universities and citizens, and certainly couldn't show irreparable harm to do this. And I think the government kind of, and you pointed to this, that they kind of were arguing, they never quite fleshed out maybe their side of how they felt they could have done a better job at saying the necessity of this order was for these reasons, and here's our evidence for, and it seemed like whatever pieces of evidence that they could offer, these nations have harbored terrorism, they didn't seem to be able to get too particularized on the harm. Not only that it seemed like the court was not going to hear, it was going to shoot down anything they came up with as conjecture. I would have liked to have asked the court, well, do you need to, if you jump off the Golden Gate Bridge, are you going to die? Do I need to experience that? We can be proactive, too. We obviously have, if you want to point to the tragedies in Europe, we can say where these people are coming. We can look at people who've been radicalized, who went to these countries and come back and commit terrorist acts. We can look at the contacts between those countries and our country. They could have done a better job of fleshing this out, but the problem with these TROs, and they get dangerously close to what's called an advisory opinion. You can't just bring a case for fun with no effect. You can't say, well, I want a ruling, and given these sets of facts, can you advise me as to how the Supreme Court or the District Court would rule in this case? So these TROs become, and preliminary injunctions become what they call mini trials. And it's a really dangerous ground because now you've got evidence coming in either way, and the judges have a lot of latitude, it seems. At least in this case, they took the latitude to kind of, okay, well, we've got standing. Okay, well, we've got a harm. And it's irreparable, and it's nationwide applying. And here's what we're going to rule. And then it gets kicked up, and then the circuit court's looking at it this way, where they want to go ahead and get into, they want to go flesh this out a little bit more, and the government submitted no evidence. I'm looking at the case right now. It is like the government submitted no evidence to rebut the state's argument that the district court's sort of merely determination temporary position is occupied for many previous years. Oh, Lord. There it is. The government has pointed to no evidence that any alien from any of the countries named in the order has perpetrated a terrorist attack in the United States. Rather than present evidence to explain the need for the executive order, the government has taken the position that we must not review this decision at all. We disagree as explained above. So, yeah, certainly I think that they have a point there, but it gets to more fundamental questions. It's almost like if you take somebody out on a boat ride who's never learned to swim and you throw them in the water and you say, well, it's your fault because you haven't paddled back. I don't think the government expected to be kind of thrown into the water this way. But I think that they're going to have to learn to swim really fast.
Yeah, I kind of get the feeling that they were pretty much over their heads, so to speak, when they walked into that particular courtroom. In my opinion, they were not expecting the slam that they got. We're again speaking to White Mamba, and he's an attorney from the state of Florida, weighing in on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in chat. Mary Brockman had a statement that I think translates to an excellent final question for you, sir, and that's this. Is the court rendering an opinion, or is it making law?
Well, in this case, I think they're not really making law. They're allowing for these types of actions to have some hold, in the sense that they're not saying what a TRO is or isn't. They're not saying what the government can or can't do. What they're doing is that they're allowing for these types of claims to be brought. I mean, a big thing in any federal court is always going to be jurisdiction. It's always going to be things like prudential barriers, like standing, things about ripeness and mootness and all of that. But what they're basically saying is that they're allowing these cases to be shaped by a state being given standing to bring a claim to get a TRO on something like this. They're saying, okay, well, we have irreparable. So in effect, yes, you can say that it certainly has legal effect, but they're not necessarily making law. Like I said, I would have thought that the district court would have just basically said, we can't hear this case, you don't have standing. And that's what I think people thought that was going to happen on review. I don't know how common this is. I'm imagining it's fairly uncommon that the courts really even want to get involved in this stuff. So just the very fact that these cases are going through and are having an effect is maybe what Mary's driving at, or maybe that's a better way of putting it. Not that I want to disagree with Mary, of course.
Okay, I'm a lying sack of shite. I actually have one more question. I thought that was going to be the last one, but no, it wasn't. Can the government, can the Trump administration, can the attorneys there craft an executive order, come up with an executive order that essentially can be foolproof, that various courts look at, and they can't really tink with it very much? Is that even possible?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, at this point, I thought that this, and I think the government attorneys thought that this was pretty bulletproof.
Oh, yeah, they thought there was a case. It
I'm
was one.
imagining some of the. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm with you. I thought, hey, we got this one on the law, and they're going to be strict constructionists in terms of interpretation, and they were gobsmacked when it wasn't.
Yes, exactly. And I don't think you need to be some Justice Scalia or some major strict constructionist. Even some of the more liberal courts, they just don't. This is an extraordinary thing. They don't want to get involved in this stuff. There are certainly cases that are much more immediate and in need of adjudication than this kind of thing. I mean, that's why I'm surprised it's even gotten to this level. That's why I like it to be sort of like the OJ case. And that, anyway, the point being is that I just don't know at this point what they're going to wind up doing with this case. I think this might be, at one point I did want to make, and I'm getting off base, is I think Congress hasn't weighed in yet. Congress is the one that makes
that's
the rules
another issue, exactly.
So I think that's going to be what's going to happen next. Well, not in terms of what this thing does, but what are they thinking? They're the ones that basically passed these statutes giving the president. We quoted the USC. We looked at it. What is the Congress doing now? They need to step up off their butts and weigh in and say, hey, look, this isn't for some district court to come in here and to say this, or for some Solicitor General from the state of Washington to come in here and argue all this crap and to get standing and to bring in the religious test. They get into a little bit of that. It's for us to make these rules. So now we're going to have to go ahead and see, I think it's going to be a power struggle. You're going to see how the three branches work or are dysfunctional at this. And if nothing else, I think that Trump, as we've mentioned before, with some of his language at least, is throwing, at the fan and seeing what sticks. And I think we're seeing the stuff go through the fan now and seeing how it's getting chopped up. And now we're going to see where it sticks. So this is just sort of like to my knowledge, is sort of kind of like the beginning. Like, as you've mentioned before, buckle up to 2017. That this isn't going to be, this is going to be kind of a long healing process, or we're going to have to go through the surgery before we get better. And I think that this is just one aspect of getting our country back to normal, if you will, and hopefully, Congress can come in maybe, and as Dave was seeing here in chat, saying, that if this is going to become the new normal for every executive order like this, then Congress is not going to want to have that. I mean, you can't just have everything the president comes up with. I mean, look at it this way. Have you heard of any of Obama's EOs being challenged in a similar way? To your knowledge? I don't know.
He did have one challenged, and it was reversed. It had to do with immigration, but that was the only one of which I have knowledge at all. He could issue them left and right. Now, here's the other thing that's interesting. In the first 2 weeks, everyone was saying that Donald Trump has issued many more orders in the first 2 weeks than Obama ever did in his first administration. Wrong. That's absolutely wrong. They were equal up to that point. They were about 8 to 10. I don't have the exact figures, but they were roughly equal. So it's just, this is a new path that I think no one has been on before, and in some cases, they just don't know how to walk around the big rocks that they're starting to encounter. Sir, White Mamba, thank you ever so much. It's the bottom of the hour. I'm going to have to go on break. I thank you ever so kindly for spending a full hour with us. That is greatly, greatly appreciated. So tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take another break. We'll be right back for the final segment, the final half hour. And again, White Mamba, thank you ever so kindly, sir, for being here. I greatly appreciate it. And folks,
you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And folks, don't go away. We'll be right back. So, here we go.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network. Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Breaking news. According to the latest report coming out of SHR Media, a merchandise store to support both the Reaver of Common Sense and SHR Media has just been unleashed to the general public. Be forewarned that this site can be contagious and numerous items can be purchased to support the best news programming. Go to Reaver.one website and click on the store link to check out the merchandise.
Hello, I'm Matt, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is Hillsdale President Larry Arnn on the continuing relevance of the Constitution.
Many argue today that the Constitution is outdated because it addresses problems peculiar to the 18th century. Some parts of the Constitution do read rather quaintly. Consider the injunction against titles of nobility in Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. But is that so outdated? The purpose of the injunction is to prevent the government granting special privileges to some for partisan reasons. This strikes at the heart of the rule of law. The crony capitalism so common today is a place where the government bestows favors and tax dollars on some businesses to give them a leg up over others. This is exactly the kind of thing the Constitution was meant to prohibit. The Constitution is not so outdated after all.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.com.
Times are dark. The people misled by corrupt politicians, lied to by establishment media, and deceived by the false messages of Islam. A nation in confusion needs a guide. It needs a man with a cane. I'm Dave Millman. Join me on Spreaker, SHR Media, High Plains Talk Radio, Live Rebooting Liberty, and YouTube for a unique brand of commentary on the unpleasant blind guy. Because truth is not always pleasant.
In a world controlled by corrupt politicians.
You got a business. You didn't build that.
A team of ordinary men emerge from the ashes to give voice to the voiceless and hope to the hopeless. Sackhead Sean.
Dude, I'm not saying cop is stupid, bro.
Sackhead Clint.
All good friends of ours usually show up drunk.
Also starring Sako as the producer.
I'm a little bit drunk, cause I'm drinking.
They are the Sackheads Radio Show. Every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific on SHRmedia.com.
Beware, the Jersey Takeover is here. Every Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can catch the Reaver Common Sense Show, hosted by Jersey Joe, right here on SHRmedia.com and HighPlainsDailyNews.com. Only Jersey can deliver hell like no one else, so consider this your fair warning.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome back to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon. Doing the job the American media maggots won't. Fundamentally changing America, one diaper at a time. Here is, courtesy of the SHR Media Network, the bloviating Zeppelin.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome back to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, where the speech is free and the booze isn't. This is the aftermath, which is all the shite that I couldn't fit into the Tuesday show. And that reminds me, a little thing to remember to tell you, and this has to do with next Tuesday's show, which isn't. And there's an excellent and perfectly understandable reason for why it isn't. And that's this. Next Tuesday is what? Valentine's Day. Oh, for the men listening now, in chat, live or in the podcast, especially those in the podcast. Next Tuesday is, in fact, Valentine's Day. Don't be silly and pull some stupid shite and forget about that. Plus, concurrently for me, it's important because not only is it Valentine's Day, but it's also my anniversary. You see, BZ was fairly sharp when he first got married, and now it's been 10 years. So 10 years ago, he decided, I know, let's get married on a day that I can actually remember, and so that's why we chose to get married on Valentine's Day. So, as a result, Mrs. BZ and BZ will be doing something Valentine's Day-like with an anniversary sheen with glitter thrown into it. So I will not be here next Tuesday night. Thursday night, however, if all goes well, I'm going to have an interview with Pat Dollard, Dollard. Google him. He also has a great blog, Pat Dollard at patdollard.com. He was a soldier. He was a journalist. He's a very conservative individual. So we're going to be talking to Pat Dollard next Thursday, very similar to White Mamba, and he's going to be talking about all the craziness and buttery goodness that's going on in the United States right now. So not going to be here on Tuesday. Take a day off. Listen to Ken, for example. There you go. That's an excellent idea. Make sure you listen to Ken. And then I will be back on Wednesday with the Sackheads. Thursday, I'm going to be interviewing Patrick Dollard, so please come back and stay tuned. In the meantime, we got a little bit less than a half hour to go. And I'd still like to add some information with regard to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and what had happened with regard to that. And a little bit of history. If you remember, I mentioned President Carter and the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952. Now, if you look at the text of that particular act back in 1952, it's almost identical to the wording of 8 U.S.C. 1182. That's where it stemmed from in my brain housing group, so to speak. So who actually last utilized this act? Yes, like I said, that was Democrat President Jimmy Carter back in 1979, 38 years ago. What he did is he specifically, this was targeting, I can't think of any other way to say it. This is targeting, specifically to keep Iranians out of the United States. Now, wouldn't that seem to you that that particular application by President Carter then, according to the Ninth Circuit now as interpreted, focuses on a very specific country and a very specific religion? Okay. Not illegal then? Why not? Oh, wait. As they say, oh, wait, there's more. Carter did more. He made all Iranian students who were already in the United States check in with the government. Can you imagine the hue and cry if Donald Trump insisted on that as well? 7,000 back in 1979 were found in violation of their visas, and a total of 15,000 Iranians were forced to leave the USA in that year, 1979. Okay, so not illegal then? Why not? There's an addition. The McCarran-Walter Act also requires that, quote, an applicant for immigration must be of good moral character. Wow. Do you think you could get away with that now? I doubt it. Good moral character and in agreement with the principles of our Constitution. If you've never heard of this particular person before, Google Dr. Zuhdi, Z-U-H-D-I, Jasser, J-A-S-S-E-R. And he has stated on any number of occasions that the way to properly vet Syrians, Somalis, people from Sudan, and all the rest of those enumerated countries and more is to sit down with them one-on-one and ask them very blunt and specific questions. What happens when you hold up a photograph of Mohammed? What do they do? Ask them if they believe Sharia law to be superior to the U.S. Constitution, and more questions like that, because certainly we're all adults on this bus, and we all realize that there is no central Somali database for individual citizens to find out who was lucky and who was good and who's going to get a lump of coal in their stocking or who's going to get a nice note from Santa Claus. That doesn't So, if you do what I call the logical extension, would it not be reasonable then to conclude that since the Quran forbids Muslims to swear allegiance to the U.S. Constitution, Sharia must be the supreme law? Technically, all Muslims should be refused immigration to the country. Just asking. Just curious. Further, the argument that Judge Robart happened to make in his Washington court, in his opinion, stated that refugees had essentially committed no acts of violence or terror in the United States. Oh, wait. Stop. That was a naked lie. I should care to point out that I'm going to tell you just a bitty teensy-weensy sampling of people that did happen to cause violence and were refugees in the United States of America. Somali refugee Abdul Razak Ali Atan went on a jihadi stabbing rampage at Ohio State University. In 2016, an Iraqi refugee Omar Farij Saeed El Hadan, dang, those are hard names to pronounce, was accused of planning to bomb a local mall in Texas. In September of 2016, a Somali-Kenyan immigrant named Dahir Adan went on a stabbing spree at a mall in St. Cloud, Minnesota. You might remember that one. Somali refugee Mohammed Osman Mohammed was arrested for planning to blow up a Christmas tree lighting ceremony in Oregon back in 2010. In 2012, Abdul Ali Adarasori, an Iraqi refugee, bombed a Social Security office in Arizona. Hey, Judge Robart, you picking up this shite, sir? Apparently not. 2 Iraqi refugees were convicted for having aided Al-Qaeda in Iraq in killing American servicemen. These so-called refugees lied on the applications, and as proof that the screening process is ineffective, they were allowed entry without issue whatsoever. Hey, Judge Robart, oh wait, but there's another one. Both Boston bombers, the Tsarnaev brothers, were asylum-seeking, fleeing Russia, and living in Kyrgyzstan before entering the United States. So, Judge Robart, I have 4 words for you. Blow it out your arse. All right? Hey, everyone conveniently forgets, Democrats and the federal courts in particular, as a matter of fact, that following 9/11, and the light will come on when I mention this, following 9/11, Congress passed the Enhanced Border Security and Visa Entry Reform Act, which addressed many of the insecurities in our visa tracking system. And they were shown to have not been working very well because guess who happened to enter our country and took flight lessons for, I want to know how to take off. I don't care about learning how to land it. Hello? Clue? Calling? Anybody here? Beulah? That's called a clue. So, the bill was originally sponsored by a group of bipartisan senators, including then-living Ted Kennedy, a massive leftist, and also, hey, guess who? Senator Dianne Feinstein from the Berserk state of Fornicalia. Among other provisions, it restricted non-immigrant visas from countries designated as state sponsors of terror. Again, I ask you, why is Trump, his EO illegal? Why weren't these? Section 306, restriction on issuance of visas to non-immigrants from countries that are state sponsors of international terrorism. And Section A goes on and on and on. I'm not going to read it. So, this, once more, again, profoundly illustrates, in my opinion, the critical need to confirm the nomination of Judge Neil Gorsuch as SCOTUS Associate Justice, because likely this case and others very much like it in the future, they're all going to end up there. Because you and I both know that the leftists and Democrats are not going to take no for an answer, and they're going to appeal and push and prod. They're going to continue to foment violence and look the other way when it happens on behalf of leftists. So, as was stated before, I believe White Mamba said it, and certainly the news readers said it prior in the videos that I played. Any 4-4 tie in the Supreme Court doesn't do anything but uphold the decision of the applicable lower appeals court. But I have to say, for shite's sake, the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights is not a fucking suicide pact. We don't have to take a gun, turn its barrel, and point it back at our heads. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We have the right to determine just who enters the country. And becoming a citizen here is a privilege and not a right. It's too early. I'm going to submit it's too early to fear this. But it is time that we absolutely have to insist that we're going to redouble our conservative efforts. Because you can absolutely be assured that the Democrats and the leftists and anarchists, they surely will. They absolutely surely will. If I can get this to play, and I believe I can, I'd like you to listen to something that Syria's President Assad, has to say.
These refugees, in your view, aligned with terrorists?
Oh, definitely. And,
definitely.
Definitely. You can find it on the net. The same picture that you saw them, in some cases, of course, in some instances.
Did you hear what he said? He asked the question to President Assad, are these refugees aligned with terror? And President Assad said yes.
Those terrorists in Syria holding the machine gun or killing people, they are peaceful refugees in Europe or in the West in general. Yeah, that's true.
So how many terrorists do you believe are among the 4.8 million Syrian refugees?
No one has any number. Nobody knows.
Do you believe it's a significant number?
Because nobody knows all the terrorists to give a percentage. No one at all.
Do you believe it's a significant number?
It's not about significant, because you don't need significant number to commit atrocities. 11th of September, it happened by only 15 terrorists out of maybe millions of immigrants in the United States.
President Assad is absolutely correct. How many terrorists does it take to hold an M47 wire-guided rocket, handheld? Answer, 1. What can one Russian RPG held by one terrorist in the United States do with any given airliner? What can a lost, and the Russians have lost many of them, up to 100, tactical backpack nukes that cannot be accounted for in Russia, and I'm sure they've been distributed all over the globe, and they are nuclear devices, tactical nuclear devices created by the Russians. We had our own version, too, here in the United States. Would it be impossible to smuggle something the size of a suitcase into the United States through, I don't know, open trains that are coming from Mexico? Or perhaps the Port of Los Angeles, Port of Long Beach, the Port of Oakland. Is that possible? So, we're thinking illogically. We don't have to have a massive horde of Muslims to be dangerous. All we need is one or a handful that are coordinated with the right mindset and the right equipment on the right day. President Assad is absolutely correct.
So it's not about the number, it's about the quality, it's about the intentions.
So if
it's not about the number, it's about the quality. Well, he means in terms of quality of death.
What you're saying is correct, then President Trump would be justified in keeping them out of the United States.
I'm not American to justify it. Only as American people will say this is against the interests of the United States or with the interest. From the outside, we can discuss it as value. This is with the values of the humanitarian situation in the world or not. That's how we can discuss it. But again, I can only speak as president. For me, the priority is to bring those citizens to their country, not to help them immigrate. That's the natural duty according to the Constitution and to the law.
You can see it behind me. It's pretty empty in DuPont Circle, but just up the hill here at the Washington Hilton, where they have the Washington or the White House Correspondents' Dinner every year.
Quiet. I don't want to hear from you. So President Assad made a rather insightful, a series of incredibly insightful comments about that. And what do we know? We know, here's what I think, and I wrote this earlier on the blog. Can Europe come back? Because ultimately, these decisions, these executive orders that are written by Trump, written back in D.C., are aimed, in my opinion, at securing as much security as can be acquired by an executive order. Now, Trump is writing executive orders because, in my opinion, Obama did. And Obama knew that with the phone and a pen, he could get a lot more done than going through the tried and true and the slow and the muddy and the ugly and the reprehensible dirty fashion of trying to get stuff through Congress, because it just doesn't happen that fast. It wasn't happening fast enough for Barack Obama. So he decided that with his phone and his pen, he was going to speed things up. And there's a reason we have the triumvirate, the legislative, the executive, the judicial, the three branches of government, and all, theoretically, are equal. When you have a president, and I'm not a great fan of just slathering your butter, your bread, with tons and tons of executive orders, but there are many, many ways in which Barack Hussein Obama set precedent, and writing a good number of hugely important and specifically crafted executive orders. Like I've said before, he was the president who wrote more executive orders with the words shall and must and will in them, which gives you no leeway in terms of an executive order. There's no wiggle room. Now, executive orders have been crafted in other ways in the past, but his were always done with an eye on mandating that whatever he had issued was going to happen. And so I can't particularly say that I fault Donald Trump for picking up that football and running with it. Now, the question is, how far is he going to run? It's no shock that I was not a fan of Donald Trump. I've told this before and I'll say it again. I was a fan of Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz messed up quite a number of times. I didn't care for his mailer, which said something similar to, if you don't feel this way about me, then you're a bad person. That ticked me off. But when everybody began to fall by the wayside, and it looked as though Donald Trump was going to be the particular individual, considering that, 15, 16, 17 people originally started out running for president on the conservative, the GOP side. It was simply assumed that Jeb Bush was going to be it, and Hillary Clinton was going to be it. Both massive establishment people, and I voted, I said to myself, I'm not voting for another Bush ever again. The hell if I'm going to do that. Nor would I ever vote for Romney again. After he made a comment to his son and said, in this presidency, I didn't really have my heart in it. It could have gone either way. Really, Mitt Romney? Really? Really? So, as far as I'm concerned, you come up for anything, dog catcher, I'm not going to vote for you. That's not going to happen. So the guy, President Trump, with the dead orange cat on his head, needs to do a couple of things. And this is nothing new. He needs to take a big ceramic cup of shut the hell up, and he needs to realize that at least I have a massive bag of with his name on it, and he needs to put down the damn telephone, his cell phone, and stop tweeting and start listening more to what I'm guessing he's being advised. My guess is that his advisors are finding him extremely difficult to manage. I don't know how you would or could manage a Donald Trump. But let this be a lesson to you, Donald Trump. And I hope you learn from it. What you thought was going to be so incredibly simple turned out to be very, very complicated. And in my opinion, unnecessarily so. It did not need to go this way. If you had decided that you were going to consult Congress, or if you decided that you were going to consult all of the people on your cabinet, all the potential cabinet people that were interested, that had an interest in this particular executive order, and gotten everybody on the bus in a big group together and decided, how are we going to roll this out in a way that will not create chaos? Because I'm of the opinion that they didn't think about that. They're definitely going to have to think about that in the future. You can't continue on this course. I think Donald Trump has the potential to be a great president. But he's on the edge of a razor blade, and I'm not quite sure which way he is going to fall. But it's a precipice. It's a very dangerous precipice. And he could go either way. He can either learn from his mistakes, or he's going to continue on the path where he frequently is his own worst enemy. I think he's got some grand ideas. I don't think he's a conservative. He's going to do stuff that pisses me off. I've got a post coming out about how he's decided that he's going to continue to hold James Comey as FBI director. I think that's a massive mistake, a horrible mistake. But all I can hope, again with crossed fingers, crossed eyes, etc., everything involved, Donald Trump, let all of these things that are happening to you, the lesson that occurred with all the airports, with all the back chat that occurred, with Judge Robart in Washington, with the 9th District, and with in consideration in totality, in the big umbrella of, the Democrats are going to continue to oppose anything and everything that you do. All I ask, Donald Trump, is listen to your advisors. In my opinion, you made some excellent choices that are going to be confirmed. And I truly believe that Neil Gorsuch is going to be confirmed. You know, and I know, that there's going to be a terrible fight against him, and moreover, a huge tidal wave of pushback against whoever he decides to nominate for the second opening in SCOTUS. There will be a second opening in SCOTUS. Donald Trump, have you learned your lesson? I only hope that you have learned your lesson. I'm not absolutely convinced. Please, God, tell me that he has. I'll not be back on Tuesday, folks, and I will be back on Thursday, talking to Pat Dollard.
Monsieur has
We'll meet again.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for listening to the Bloviating Zeppelins Berserk Bobcat Ballroom on the SHR Media Network. Today's show on Thursday being, of course, the Aftermath. If you want to contact me, you'll find me on Twitter at bzep and on my blog at bloviatingzeppelin.net. My original intro music is by Possessed Tranquility at reverbnation.com. Promotional consideration as per normal is by Lockheed Martin Skunk Works and the Boeing Company. If it ain't Boeing, I ain't going. And, of course, Kettle One. thanks to my personal KC-135 Kettle One refueling team. Tune in to the Sackheads radio show tomorrow night, the best in late-night talk radio. Not tomorrow night. That's right, today is Thursday. Never mind. Do this, though. Check out Ken McClinton on the Exceptional Conservative Show and Jersey Joe. Thank you ever so kindly for listening and spending your time with me. Good night.
Quiet down now and get some sleep.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben.
Good night, everyone. Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children.
Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night,
Jim Bob.
Go to sleep.
Good night, and good luck.